Our final speaker this afternoon is Andrew Huberman, a neurobiologist at Stanford who has a popular podcast focusing on the brain. He is here today to talk about brain health and how we can maintain and improve our cognitive function as we age. Welcome, Dr. Huberman.
Great, well, thanks for having me here, and thanks everyone for being here. Today we're going to talk about the brain, but we're actually going to talk about health for your entire nervous system. So just in 1 minute, I'll tell you a little bit about your nervous system. That includes your brain, which is the stuff inside your skull, of course. Most people don't realize this, but there are two bits of brain that are outside the cranial vault or skull, and those are your neural retina. So your eyes are actually part of your brain, and that will become important in a few minutes as to how you can use your eyes literally in order to improve brain health and function. And then, of course, you have your spinal cord, which is inside the bony casing of your spine. And then all of the neurons, which are just nerve cells in your brain, your eyes, your spinal cord, those connect to different parts of your body and then different organs in your body, including your heart, your lungs, your pancreas, your spleen. All the organs also are communicating back to the brain. So the real role of your nervous system is to allow you to sense things, perceive things, think, remember, plan, and generate action, and also deploy all the sorts of good stuff that, when your immune system is active, it's because your nervous system told it to be active. So how can you keep this incredible thing that we call the nervous system healthy and functioning at any age? Turns out there's some basic approaches to that. In thinking about how to adjust one's human health at any level, there are really about 5 categories of approaches. The first are going to be behaviors, so things you're going to do or avoid doing. Nutrition, so basically what you eat and perhaps also what you try and avoid eating. Supplementation, we heard about today, prescription drugs, and then there's a lot of excitement nowadays about so-called brain-machine interface, the idea that maybe someday there'd be a little chip that you could insert behind your ear and it would allow you to remember things faster or learn more quickly. That technology is still on the horizon, but I think that day will come. Okay, so today we're going to talk mainly about behavioral tools that are very powerful for improving the health of your nervous system. And the way to think about these tools is that if you perform them regularly, ideally every day or most days, they more or less raise the tide of health on your nervous system. What do I mean by that? You can think about your nervous system as a boat, and that boat can only get out of port and out to ocean and function really well on a consistent basis if the tide is high enough. So think about doing these behaviors as a way to raise the tide and allow your nervous system to function as well as it can, regardless of what you use that nervous system to learn and think about and do. So the number one tool that I recommend to everybody to improve the function of your nervous system and actually your hormone system, etc., is to get bright light, ideally sunlight, in your eyes within the first hour of waking. And certainly if you wake up before the sun comes out, to get outside as soon as you can. This is true also on overcast days. So believe it or not, on a densely overcast day, there are more photons, light energy, coming in through that cloud cover than you could ever get from bright indoor lights, unless you've gone out and bought a daytime simulator or something, which I don't recommend you even have to do. Most people can just get that sunlight exposure for about 10 minutes every morning, get outside, take off your sunglasses if you can safely do that. Most people can do that. Don't try and do this through a window or a windshield. It's fine to wear corrective lenses like contacts and eyeglasses, if anything, that will focus the light on your eyes. The reason this is important is that you have neurons in your eye. They go by a particular name, melanopsin cells, but that's not important. They communicate to a little area of your brain above the roof of your mouth called the hypothalamus, and they send a wake-up signal to your brain that coordinates the action of a lot of hormones and neurotransmitters and things that make you feel alert and active during the day. And they also set a timer on some of the sleepiness signals that are going to arrive about 16 hours later, and sleep is vitally important to brain function. So if you don't get bright light in your eyes early in the day, often enough, you can actually become jet lagged at home, and this is happening a lot when people are working from home, and jet lag has all sorts of negative health issues. So even if you're not doing shift work, many people have disrupted circadian rhythms. The other thing is try and avoid bright light exposure of any color, not just blue light. I'll repeat that, not just blue light. We've heard so much about how bad blue light is. Blue light is actually great during the day and the morning. It will wake up your whole nervous system and body in the right ways. But between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., avoid bright lights of any kind, especially overhead lights. Those have a detrimental effect on things like dopamine, on learning and memory. They can cause various stress effects. If you look at bright light once, no big deal. But if every night you're waking up and flipping on bright lights, that's not going to be good for your brain and your nervous system health. So really dim those screens at night, turn down the overhead lights, use desk lamps, or use no light at all if you can do that safely. The other thing is get adequate sleep. The brain remodels and changes. It undergoes what we call neuroplasticity, which is its ability to learn. throughout the lifespan, but only if you get adequate deep sleep. And one of the best ways to get adequate deep sleep is to follow the light viewing recommendations that I just talked about a moment ago. And then the other thing is to lower the temperature in whatever sleeping environment you're in the room by about 1 to 3 degrees. Make that room cool because your body actually needs to go down in body temperature in order to fall and stay asleep. A lot of people rely on supplements like melatonin, which will help you get to sleep, but won't keep you asleep. And in fact, I personally am not a big fan of melatonin supplementation except in specific cases because it has a lot of other effects and you really have to check the quality of the supplements and so forth. Try reducing the temperature in the room. You can still get under warm blankets. You'll kick off those blankets as the night goes on, but try and lower the temperature in the room. The other thing we've heard a lot about today, so I'll just briefly cover this, which is the brain is a very metabolically demanding organ. That means it needs blood supply to bring glucose, or even if you're on a ketogenic diet, you still need great blood supply to your brain. Actually, when you sleep at night, there's a clearance of a kind of sewage system that gets cleaned out at night. It's called the lymphatic system, from lymph, but of these cells in the brain that we call glia, so the lymphatic system. So you can actually wash out the debris in neurons during deep sleep. One of the things that can enhance the function of the lymphatic system and enhance circulation to the brain, offset the probability of stroke and all sorts of things, is to get 150 minutes to 180 minutes per week total of what they call zone 2 cardiovascular exercise. So that would be cardiovascular exercise that would allow you to, if someone said, what's your name, that you could say it, but you probably couldn't say a whole sentence. So if you're walking and talking to friends and you can tell a whole story, you're not going intensely enough. If you're completely out of breath and you can't say your name, then that's probably too intense. So right in that zone 2, as they call it, 150 to 180 minutes per week. Some people like to use wrist monitors and heart rate monitors, but you don't need that, okay? Use your ability to speak your name or a complete sentence as a guide. It's also been discussed today, and it's quite clear that resistance training of some kind is important. The numbers that seem to come out of the literature, at least by my read, for sake of brain health, is that in order to maintain muscle mass, you want about 6 working sets, those sets that are challenging, per muscle group per week. So you could divide those up, or you could do more if you like, provided you can get enough sleep and recover from that. But that's the minimum, and I gather most people, including myself sometimes, are not getting that minimum, but that's important. Also, the zone 2 cardiovascular exercise. 2 quick tips about respiration and breathing. We put food into our mouth, it gets digested to deliver nutrients to all the cells of our body. Likewise, we need to get oxygen to all the cells of our bodies, and we don't have gills, so we wouldn't take food and cram it in through our ear. We have to put it in through our mouth. Likewise, you need to get air into your system to the lungs, and then it goes from the lungs to your blood, and then oxygen can be delivered to all the cells of your body, and you can also discard the other gas, which is called carbon dioxide. Breathing properly is essential. The proper way to breathe for sake of health, immune system health, brain health, cognitive function can actually be enhanced by becoming a nasal breather. Now, unless you're talking or eating or exercising hard, try and breathe through your nose. If you have challenges breathing through your nose, breathe through your nose more because the sinuses can dilate. This is based on excellent work that's been done by people here at Stanford and elsewhere. There's a terrific book out there called Jaws, A Hidden Epidemic, that has authors all from Stanford Med and Stanford. You can check that out. It will also detail some of the enhancement of cognitive features of the face, higher cheekbones. Believe it or not, tooth health is improved by nasal breathing, so become a nasal breather if you're not already. And then the last thing is stress. Stress is inevitable. We would all love to get regular massages, regular exercise, eat perfectly, have great social connection, get sunshine. But listen, even if we're doing all those things, sometimes we're not able to do all those things all the time. And there's this irony of stress, which is when we are very stressed, we tend to not do the things that we need to do to offset stress. For that reason, my laboratory and Dr. David Spiegel's lab, he's our associate chair of psychiatry here at Stanford Medicine, have been working on different breathing patterns that can be used to adjust stress in real time. So when you're feeling stressed, the best tool that we are aware of is to use what are called physiological sighs. So this would be 2 inhales through the nose and a long exhale through the mouth. So yes, I'm giving you permission to mouth breathe here. So anytime you're feeling stressed, you do this. You inhale deeply through the nose, and then you sneak in a little bit of extra air, and then offload all that air through the mouth. The reason is physiological sighs are actually something that you do about every 5 minutes or so subconsciously. You also do it in sleep. Your lungs are not just 2 big bags of air. They actually have billions or hundreds of millions, I should say, to be accurate, of little sacs. And when we get stressed, those little sacs collapse and they have some liquid inside, so it's hard to reinflate them. So if you've ever tried to open up a kid's balloon at a kid's party, you have to sometimes blow twice. And that reinflates those sacs, and then you can offload carbon dioxide, which is associated with the stress response. So you sometimes only need 1, maybe 2 of those physiological sighs to adjust your stress in real time. And this can be very beneficial. It doesn't take away the need to do all the other stress relieving activities, but it will help. It works the first time, it works every time, and you have dedicated neural machinery in your brain for generating these physiological sighs. So it's not a hack, you're taking advantage of a naturally occurring machinery that you and everybody else has. So those are the things. I listed 5 of them. View sunlight, avoid light late at night, try and reduce the temperature of the room so you can get to sleep at night. I talked about the exercise recommendations, be a nasal breather, and cyclic sighing is the other respiration or breathing advice.
Okay, thank you so much. And thanks for listing out those things. And it's going to be tough to try to do all of them in one day, but we'll give it a shot. So a few questions from our audience. Okay, are there any websites or apps that you would recommend using to challenge the brain? And obviously I've heard mixed things about whether those actually help mental acuity.
Yeah, so for sake of learning, I mean, there are a number of apps and commercial approaches that are available out there to enhance learning and memory. Personally, I think the best way to enhance learning and memory is to take advantage of the 50+ years of excellent research on so-called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change in response to experience at any age. Some of this work, much of this work was actually done here at Stanford and Stanford Med. Work from Eric Knudsen, work from Carla Schatz, has shown that there are really 2 phases to learning. The first phase is to get very focused on whatever it is you're trying to learn. Now, if you're a child or you're younger than 25, you can learn things passively. Just passive exposure to things will change the brain. The unfortunate truth is also that at any age, if bad things happen to us, that will also change the brain. One trial learning is very good for things that could be dangerous or traumatic or bad for us. And thank goodness that's the case, because we wouldn't have to go through multiple trials of those things in order to learn. But if you want to learn things, math, a new language, how to dance, a new sport, how to relate to others better, the key is to focus very intensely during the learning bout, and then to access deep sleep, or what we call non-sleep deep rest, as soon as possible afterwards. So the way this typically works is you focus hard on trying to learn something. Maybe it's a piece of music. I'm terrible at music, so this would be a good example. And I'm struggling at scales, Then I sleep for a few nights, or I go away from the practice, and then all of a sudden I can do it. This is also true for motor skills. And that's because the rearrangement of neural tissue, the literal rewiring of the brain, occurs during deep sleep. So do and engage the tools for deep sleep. Maximize your sleep 80% of the night. You want to get good sleep. And if you're not getting that, you really should be striving toward that as your #1 priority. Now, in terms of focus, a lot of people say, well, how do I focus? I can't focus. Actually, the best way to get better at focusing is to use your visual system. So unless you're low vision or no vision, in which case you would use your hearing, because my lab does work on visual deficits, and so I'm working all day with people that have visual deficits, but most people can see, and even if you can't see well, the idea is to focus your visual attention on a given target, as this would be a practice. So you could actually set something in front of you. You could even use your hand or your computer screen, turn off the screen, put a visual target on there, and see how long you can hold your gaze there. It's fine to blink. You want to lubricate the eyes. It's one of the main functions of blinking. You can build up your capacity to focus, and you can even just do that exercise for about 30 seconds, and then shift into whatever it is you're trying to learn. This actually works great before conversation. So if you're going to have a hard conversation, you really need to focus. You can do this prior. It's a little silly, but believe it or not, there are clinical trials now looking at using these visual focus approaches for things like ADHD. And I think nowadays we all feel like we have a little bit of ADHD with the amount of scrolling on phones, et cetera. And then one other tool here is there were 2 excellent papers published just last year in excellent cell-press journals, peer-reviewed journals, showing that non-sleep deep rest, just relaxing, not looking at your phone, just doing some breathing and just kind of chilling out for about 20 minutes after a learning bout, or taking a 20-minute nap or so, can greatly accelerate learning. The rule on naps, however, is if napping prevents you from getting to sleep at night and adequate deep sleep, then you shouldn't be a napper. And nobody should be napping for more than 90 minutes during the day, because that can really disrupt your sleep cycles. So focus and rest. Learning to toggle back and forth between those is going to, in my opinion, is going to be far more effective and in concert with your natural biology for learning and memory than any kind of app or tool. But there's some decent apps and tools out there. I'm mainly focused on the underlying biology and the natural mechanisms.
Okay. Does that nap or rest have to happen right after the focus?
Great question. It does not. You have about a 4 to 6 hour window.
Okay.
And of course, getting adequate deep sleep at night is going to be the best thing. Now, anytime you talk about sleep, people develop this kind of sleep-related anxiety, that if you can't sleep, that it's going to completely throw you off. For that, I really want to emphasize the incredible work of my colleague, Dr. Aaliyah Crum, in the psychology department here at Stanford. She focuses on mindsets. And it turns out our mindset about sleep is very important as to whether or not a bad night's sleep really throws us off or not. If you think that you need excellent sleep every night in order to function, you're going to become more reliant on that, and one poor night's sleep will really throw you off. If you believe that your system is resilient and you can perform pretty well, then you'll be resilient and you can perform pretty well. But you can't escape the need for sleep completely. And they've done beautiful studies actually lying to people about how poor their sleep was or how good their sleep was, independent of how well they actually slept, and showing that your thoughts about your sleep performance are really important. And for that reason, and I know I'm going to lose some friends by saying this, that's why I don't wear any sleep monitoring device, because I don't want to score about how I slept. I want to subjectively adjust my mindset and my thoughts about sleep. Some people like sleep devices because it keeps them on track. Some people like to count calories. Some people don't. Everybody's different. Do what works for you.
Okay. I've heard our brains are changing with the use of technology. How can I improve my memory and brain power in this era of Googling everything?
Yes, our brains are changing. This is the first time, at least that I'm aware of, in human evolution that we've typed with our thumbs. Probably the first time in human evolution that we can view 50 movies inside of 60 seconds or so by just scrolling through an Instagram feed. Movies are an incredibly powerful stimulus for our brain and body. They wake us up, but we've never before had to contend with context switching at this rate. I mean, I say never before. I wasn't consulted at the design phase, so I don't know. But we assume that we've never had these kind of rapid context switches all the time. Rapid context switching is terrible for the brain. It's just really not good. But we can contend with it. And so we can scroll Instagram for a while, we can search the web for a while, but I would say for every hour that one does that, we should be spending at least twice as much time in focused, dedicated practices. Now that could be conversation where phones are away. It could be a meal where ideally phones are away and there are no screens. It could be reading a book or even a Kindle. Again, if you're going to read your Kindle late at night, dim that screen way, way down. Even if you're wearing blue blockers, dim it way, way down. So the other thing that our brain evolved to do, we know there's dedicated neural machinery for speaking and hearing. There's also dedicated neural machinery for writing. We weren't really organized with neurons and neural circuits for typing with our thumbs. We've created the ability to do that. So some regular journaling is known to be an excellent practice. Just even the practice of having to write out complete sentences. I mean, even as grown adults, we are now speaking in descriptive clauses. Our punctuation is off because we use texting to just communicate so quickly, or even voice recognition where we sort of all acknowledge, okay, you don't even need to use proper grammar. So constructing proper sentences, forcing oneself a little bit each day to write things out, punctuate, this is enormously powerful, and it keeps the neural circuits associated with language, which is associated with thinking, which is associated with memory, and even better, narrative, if you can take some time to write out stories and think about things in a kind of story narrative. I mean, we evolved to do that. And so it's not about completely avoiding these technologies. They're here to stay. It's really about offsetting those technologies with some of the other naturally occurring machinery. And it actually just feels really good to write. It feels really good to read. There's a friction to it at the beginning, what I call limbic friction. Your limbic system goes, oh my God, I hate this. I'd much rather scroll Instagram or surf the web or just talk into voice recognition. But when you do it, there's a feedback loop that a few minutes into it, you start to feel like, oh wow, this is really good. And you actually feel like you've accomplished something, and indeed you have.
Okay. So something pretty serious. If someone has a family history of Alzheimer's, do you recommend genetic testing? And is there anything they can do to preserve memory, particularly if they're at increased risk?
Yeah, so this is obviously a very serious issue and a somewhat controversial issue as it relates to the genetic testing, because biomarkers for Alzheimer's do exist. The smoking gun biomarkers are not quite there, nor unfortunately is there a universal treatment for Alzheimer's that is effective for everybody yet. I mean, obviously if there's age-related cognitive decline and Alzheimer's in your family, contact a neurologist. Talk to them early, right? Ask what the latest and best is in terms of treatments. Once again, we return to the foundational practices though. Quality cardiovascular exercise is going to enhance blood flow to the brain, lymphatic clearance during sleep. Maybe I didn't emphasize this enough before, but by getting that regular exercise, you're increasing the lymphatic clearance during sleep. There's even some evidence that sleeping with your feet slightly elevated by about 10 to 15 degrees can increase lymphatic clearance. This is also why when you go to sleep on a plane or in a chair, you wake up and you don't feel quite as rested. The lymphatic clearance is not quite as robust when you're upright. So adjusting sleep posture. And then of course, there's a lot of controversy about whether or not ketogenic diets are good for Alzheimer's, or plant-based diets, or nowadays there are even some extreme versions of everything, meat-based diets, et cetera. There aren't a lot of clinical trials yet to support one or the other, but they're starting to emerge. In the meantime, improving lymphatic clearance, keeping cardiovascular function excellent by the practices that you've heard, I think, from everybody on this panel today, is going to be one of the best things that you can do. Also, staying cognitively engaged, we hear that. And then there's also some very good evidence, here I'm showing my bias as a visual neuroscientist, that making sure that you wear the proper corrective lenses if you need them to get sharp visual focus can help offset some of the age-related cognitive decline, because cognitive focus generally follows visual focus. So if you can't focus visually, it's very hard to focus mentally. And we know this, all of us know this by experience. When we're tired, our kind of experience of the world starts to flicker and kind of fade out. So make sure that you're getting regular eye exams, get your pressures checked for glaucoma. I'm putting on my ophthalmology hat there. But keep vision healthy, that's one way. And then, of course, social engagement has been shown to be really, really crucial. So if you have a family member who's somewhat isolated, especially in this time, and there's a concern about age-related cognitive decline, you really want to engage them. And then the sunlight viewing that we talked about before, believe it or not, has been shown to offset some, not just things like the tendency to develop early onset cognitive decline, but there's some interesting evidence about sunlight exposure and MS, multiple sclerosis, and reducing incidence of MS. So the sun is a powerful tool. And again, think about it as these eyes that we call eyes are not just eyes, they're actually two pieces of your brain that are outside your cranial vault, and they're designed to be there in part as a wake-up signal to the rest of your brain. So get that morning sunlight as best you can.
All right. And as we wrap up, can you give us a hint on how to prevent procrastination?
This is the number one question. The number one question I used to get is, how do I keep my memory as I get older? Now the number one question is, how do I avoid procrastination? If I had an answer to this that would work for everybody, well then I'd be on the donor wall of the hospital, and I'm not. And that's where I'd give my money. But the fact of the matter is that procrastination can arrive through a couple sources. It turns out some people, this is for work from the Wharton School of Business, some people like procrastination because they need that stress kick in order to, or a deadline to really get going. I confess I'm one of these people. I'll wait until the last minute, and then all systems kind of go into maximum focus, and I'm most efficient under pressure. Some people are the opposite. They really get stressed out by not meeting deadlines early enough. I was the last one to arrive today, and I think I probably gave people a little bit of a cortisol blip for doing that. I apologize, but that's my tendency. Here's the key. If you want to be less of a procrastinator, you need to be comfortable with adrenaline, also called epinephrine, in your system. Now, epinephrine and adrenaline were designed to mobilize us, not just when predators are chasing us, but in response to anything we care about, positive or negative, getting away from the bad thing or toward the good thing. So the most important thing to do is get comfortable with the fact that in order to lean into action, you're going to have to feel a little bit of agitation, maybe even some jitteriness. And there's actually a breathing tool that one can use to do this. I don't recommend that people who are prone to anxiety attacks or panic attacks do this, but most people can get away with doing this. Don't do it while you're driving or while you're swimming, please. But it's very simple. You're just going to do 25 or 30 very deep breaths. This is actually part of a study that my lab and Dr. Spiegel's lab are working on. You can try this. Just a warning, you will feel really energized and activated because it causes the release of adrenaline in the body, and it's equivalent in the brainstem. And I'll do this, it looks ridiculous, but I'll do it since I'm on the spot here. It involves breathing in deeply through your nose and exhaling forcefully through the mouth. Normally when we breathe, we passively exhale. A forceful exhale will also further increase adrenaline. So you do that 30 times. I'm not gonna do it 30 times because you would all fall asleep out of boredom, but it goes something like this. So
okay, that's good.
I'm inhaling as much as I can. They don't want me to breathe on them. And exhaling. As you do that, you're going to heat up. You're going to turn red. You're going to feel activated. You're going to feel somewhat agitated. But you'll be as alert as if you drank 2 cups of espresso. Your ability to focus and lean into physical or mental action after 30 of those breaths is heightened by at least 50%. So a lot of people are procrastinating because they're just not good at going from a standstill to what I call forward center of mass. And they try and come up with all sorts of elaborate schemes, 2 espresso, 3 inspirational videos, wonder if I'm, really want to do the thing I'm procrastinating about. The goal is to lower what we call your activation energy. The best graduate students and postdocs in my laboratory and that I've ever observed, and it seems all physicians, seem to have this quality of having very low activation energy. You say, we need to do this, and they're already walking down the hall to do it. And then there are people like me that are a little bit more like lazy, like my bulldog was, where you tell them to do something and might move their eyeballs. The key is to get into action quickly. The key to getting into action quickly is to leverage the adrenaline system. And you can think all day about tricks to manipulate yourself into getting out of procrastination into action, I say when your brain isn't functioning the way you want, use your body to shift your brain into a forward center of mass.
Okay, thank you, thank you. All right, thank you to all of our speakers for joining us today.